Good morning. I want to continue today on the topic of eye accessing cues. Now, it was in the 1890s where William James really came up with this theory that when he was thinking about certain things, his eyes would move into a particular direction. And he was wondering, is there something to it? Is there a pattern to it? And then he started to look at other individuals and he started to ask questions to other individuals. And lo and behold, he found that there were certain eye movement patterns that he could identify based on the information that he was asking these individuals. Now, there are different models out there when it comes to eye accessing cues, and even if you go and Google that and look it up, but it boils down to the same thing at the end, is that people, it says the same thing. People's eyes move as they process and recall information that they've stored in their mind or in their brain. And what they have found is when we speak to individuals, when our eyes move upwards, we are recalling or accessing information that's in the form of pictures, images, visual. Our visual field is when we look upwards. When our eyes move laterally from side, you look to the side or you look to the other side, it doesn't matter. We are recalling information that we have stored auditory, in other words, sounds and how things sounded when we memorize it and things like that. Now, the other two are when we look downwards. Now, when I look downwards to my left, they call it auditory digital, or we can also talk about it as internal dialogue. That's self-talk. So when you speak to somebody and you ask them a question and they look down to like my left, when you stand in front of them, it's obviously your right. When they look down into the left, they are essentially recalling what is the self-talk, what are they saying to themselves. If it's down to my right, my own eyes, down to my right, your left, as you stand in front of me or in front of the person, people are accessing kinesthetic, I almost want to say memories, recollections, is emotions and feelings. That is downwards, when you look downwards. Now, being able to watch somebody's eye movements, it really helps me to know what type of questions I need to ask them. If you recall the previous session we did on representational systems, you will recall that I told you in order to build instant rapport with an individual, you want to listen out for words that people use in their conversations that will give you a clue as to what are the representational systems that they tap into. And then you repeat those words back to them. Now, this is more or less the same thing. If you can identify an individual's eye accessing cues and the pattern, you can ask them questions that tap into that particular area where they recall information. So let me give you an example. If you have somebody that says, I don't see how I can do that, it means that they have a recollection of visual things, imagery, pictures. And when you respond to that or ask them another question, you want to ask the question, I almost want to say, if it's in picture format, you want to ask them, what is it that you see? If you ask them something like, what are you telling yourself? Or what do you hear? There's an immediate disconnect in terms of the connection between the two individuals when it comes to conversations, communication. So the eye accessing is a really powerful tool that you can use to steer, and I don't want to lead a conversation necessarily always, but to steer and direct the conversation in a particular direction based on how people memorize information and how they recall that information. So I can quickly show you. Let me share my screen quickly. I want to show you what it would look like. So this is a picture. Let me see if I can bring it up a little bit. Oops. This is a picture. So remember now, this is as you stand in front of people. Now there is an element of constructing something and remembering something, which just means that's what the C stands for. It's just, it means people are imagining it. So if you had to ask somebody, you can test this out. Ask them, imagine what your beach house would look like one day. And for the most part, individuals will look up to your, like, if you stand in front of them, remember now it's different, but if you stand in front of them, will look up to their, your left, this side. So because they're constructing something. Same with when they listen, auditory, when they use auditory recollection, and same with the feelings. Remembering, see again. People might look the other way upwards, and if they have to recall and remember a sound again, they will look to your right as you stand in front of them. That's important to make that distinction, right? So when you see a picture like this, it's how the individual stands in front of you. All right, so I hope that helps to clarify a little bit. I'll leave a link to a similar picture so that you can actually go back and look at it and read up a little bit more about it. So another example I can give you is sometimes when we are in a situation, I've certainly been in a situation like that, and you get emotional, but you don't want to cry. What's the first thing we do is we look upwards and we say, oh gosh, I don't know where that came from. Why do we do that? If we look downwards, we are tapping into the emotional side of things and the emotional memory of things. When we look upwards, it's very hard to tap into that emotions when we are looking to, I almost want to say, to the visual field. So what we're actually unconsciously trying to do is to disconnect from the emotional side of things by looking upwards. A good tactic that you can use if you are in a situation, like let's say you have to give a presentation, or even your performance review, wherever you might be, and you feel emotional for whatever reason, or you're going to go into a conversation that is emotional for you, but you don't want to cry, don't look down. Whatever you do, don't look down and to your right. That's where your own right. That's where the feelings, the kinesthetic sensations and emotions are. So now, does this hold true for every single person? No, it doesn't, because there are always, like I always say with nutrition, it's not a one size fits all. There are exceptions, people with cerebral palsy, people with certain brain injuries, it might look different. But what you want to do is you want to identify the pattern in a particular individual and then take it from there. It's a useful tool, but don't take it as a given that when a person looks a certain way, that it must absolutely be how they are recalling and processing and recalling information. It could differ. But like I said, the whole idea is to look at the pattern and identify the pattern. And then it's also easier that if people, for whatever reason, you've identified a certain pattern, let's say in your friend or in your boss, and then one day suddenly it looks completely different based on the answer they give and the information they're sharing, you might know there's something going on there with that particular individual. Also a useful tool to do that. The other thing that was interesting for me is I went back, and I love going back to the Bible to see what I firmly believe that when even right through the Bible, we were created, the human beings exactly as is, right? Like God wanted us to be. And the things that we are finding out now through research, especially neurological, the neurobiology, we have so many sophisticated tools now to literally look under the hood, see what's going on neurobiologically when we are meditating, when we have certain spiritual experiences and things like that. And it's not to, for me, not to justify the Bible. It's for me amazing to see how the Bible and science is coming together, because the Bible for me is nothing other than a big book of science. If you look, not only, obviously it's God's word, but amazing elements of science in the Bible as well. But I'm digressing now. So what was interesting is, and I'm not a theologian at all, by all means, but what was interesting is I went back and looked at instances where it says in the Bible, lift up your eyes. There are 12 instances that I'm aware of. 11 of them speaks about lift up your eyes and see, and the other one speaks about lift up your eyes and look. Now, there can obviously be different translations, but it was interesting also for me to see that as we as human beings, when we look up and we're accessing information from our visual field and from our, I almost want to say visual memory, and that's how we process and recall information. It was interesting to see that the Bible also indicates, now obviously it can also indicates to God above, depending on who wrote it and who's speaking in the Bible. But it was an interesting thing for me to see the instances where it says that lift up your eyes and look, lift up your eyes and see, which is an indication of a visual picture, a visual image taken into account. Just the interesting point I wanted to make, at least for me, interesting. So I will continue with these sessions. I'll put a link into my right, I think, to the previous video if you've missed that, and I'll put any links in the description where you can go and read up a little bit more about this, and also a image where you can find a picture that explains which direction, where your eyes go, what it means, and test it out on your friends. Ask them questions like, you can ask them questions like, what were the color of your room when you were a child? And you can see they should, when they remember something, their eyes will go one way. If you ask them, imagine what your room would look like when you have a beach house, and then they would, it's a thing that they need to imagine, eyes would go a different way. You can ask him, imagine what it would sound like, eyes would go one way, and then you can ask them, can you remember what it sounded like when this and this happened, eyes would move a different way. So it's a nice thing to do. Practice it on your friends, practice it on your boss, practice it when you have any type of dialogue with individuals, and see how it goes. And let me know in the comment section if you've tried it out. And obviously the whole aim is you want to ask them questions that tap into that area of how they process and recall information. Like if they look upwards, you know, they're a visual person, you want to use words like see, in terms of pictures, describe for me how it was, whatever the case might be. And when they look left and right, auditory, you want to use words that indicate sounds back to them when you ask them questions or have conversations with them. I did put a link in the previous video with a list of words that will tell you if people use these words, they are, it indicates that they are visually representing something in their mind. If they use other words, they are auditory, using auditory words to represent something in their mind, and so forth. So you can find that information also in there. All right, I'm done. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.